They just can't think that a black woman did that. You know, no, 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 no.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to hear from a remarkable lady whose achievements have been kept secret. Miss Mattiedna Johnson may not be a name that you recognize, but her groundbreaking medical discoveries have touched every person in this audience in some way. Miss Johnson is an international medical pioneer who has delivered babies in Africa and who has helped save the lives of American soldiers on the beaches of the Normandy invasion during World War II. Well, thanks to some friends from Can Do and Associates, with the desire and hard work, the secret is out. Can Do and Associates presents Mattiedna Johnson, My Life, and Now the Story.
I'm from Amite County, Mississippi. It's down in the hilly section of Mississippi. I was really born in the country. My father went to get my grandmother because my mother was in labor and she was going to have this fifth kid, which I happened to be the one. And so he had to bring her in the buggy. And of course, they got in there late in the evening, and with the fireplace and the hot water, my grandmother gave my mother some tea to drink. And my mother's kind of worn out, so she went off to sleep. And of course, my dad and my grandmother sat down and they went to sleep, and everything was quiet. So just as the birds and the chickens started crowing out in the backyard, I was born. In fact, I was born placenta and all. And of course, those are some of the hazards of birth. And my grandmother got me out of the placenta and gave me to my father. And he was holding me in his hands. And he would tell me about it years later. He would say, "Tots, I named you Tots because you were so little, and you were just about this size of a baby in my hands. And I thought you wouldn't live. You're so little and so quiet." And he said that he started praying and asking God to spare my life. And he would look me straight in the eye when he would tell me this. "And Tots, I told God that if he spared your life, I'd give you back to him in life." And he said one of his tears dripped down on my little lips, and I started tasting the tear. And in tasting the tear, he felt that God had answered his prayer that quick. And if I could eat, he could feed me, and I would live. So that was his answer to his prayer. And during those years, I would ask him, "Well, Papa, what do you want me to do? How you and God got this thing all hooked up? What'll I do?" He says, "I want you to become a medical missionary and go to Africa and serve." He said, "That would be the greatest thing that I think you could do." I said, "Well, Papa, we're chopping cotton now, or we're picking peas, or whatever we were doing on the farm." I said, "That's going to take a lot of work." He said, "Oh, you and God will do it." And he said, "You know, for a few weeks there after you were born, I kept you on my chest at night so I'd make sure that you were alive. So this was why I wanted you to be able to live." And this was my early beginning.
The year 1929, Herbert Clark Hoover, the president, and Miss Mattiedna Johnson using household chemicals to help save her mother's life.
It was in 1929, beginning 1930, after my mother had the last baby. You know, they laid down for 9 days. They didn't get up. So some of this blood was in her body, and it held on and became an abscess. And in those days, this became galloping consumption, and many of them died. But in Mama's case, she was getting down to skin and bones by the 1st of March. Well, my Aunt Mary felt that Mama was going to die, and so she should cross her hands and close her eyes and all this kind of stuff. But I had just given Mama some coffee that morning, and I didn't think Mama was ready to die. So I told Mary, let's chop out our roll and go to the house and see what it looks like if Mama's going to be dead. So Mary said, okay, come on, we'll go. So we came to the peach orchard, and I knew that the roof on the house was made out of tin, and that house in the summertime got like an oven. So I broke some of the peach tree shoots, you know how peach tree shoots come up, and I broke some down off, and I was going to fan her with them. But then I noticed the leaves felt cool. So I decided to strip the leaves off of these shoots. Of course, it did make switches, but I'd throw them away, so that I rubbed them together, and mixing this chlorophyll of the leaves, and I put some apple juice that had gone to vinegar. It turned into vinegar, you know, after it sours for a while. That I mixed it in there, and I put a poultice on her head first, and it dripped all down. So I told Mary, I said, let's take the poultice off of her head and put it on her right chest where the pain was. So she slept on her right side because Papa was on this side of the bed, and so this way she's crumpled over here. So the drainage got into one of her left lungs, and so that's where the pain was. But now I wasn't that scientific. I just knew it was on the side, the right side. So that's when I put the poultice on there. And when I did that, well, I had made her up some sweet water. And what did I use for the sweet water?
Yeah,
I took some apple juice, some apple jelly out of one of the big half-gallon jars of apple jelly, and mixed it up in some boiled water, because, see, Mama was very particular about what she eat and what she drank. So I had to make it sweet so she'd drink it. So I called it sweet water. So I told Papa that he should get Mama to drink the sweet water because she was getting down to skin and bones, and she wasn't hardly eating anything. So that was his job. It was part of the job. So she had been drinking this now for a couple of days, but she still had the pain. So then that particular day, when she just seemed to have been so bad off, but yet she didn't have a real fever, you see. So she was perspiring, and so I told Mary to come and help me change the bed because we didn't want her to get pneumonia from drying the sweat around in the bed. So Mary said, all right, you go on that side of the bed and pull her over, and I'll push her from this side, and we'll put the dry sheets under the back on this side. So I told her, okay. So I went around on that side of the bed and pulled her over, and in pulling her over this way, that abscess popped and bloody stuff just shot out of her nose and mouth. And so I grabbed the washpan and caught the blood and stuff, and it was thick and cheesy. And so she whooped and coughed and coughed and coughed, and I told her to breathe and then cough and breathe and then cough, and then gradually we got most of it out, and it ended up to be a pint jar of stuff that came out of her chest. Of course, we saved it for the doctor, but I put a top on it so nobody would waste it or anything. And so after the doctor came back and he saw it, he said she must have had an abscess on her lungs and not galloping consumption. And so I think he wrote a paper about that. But anyway, because Mama had gotten better, I decided for the Children's Day at Walnut Grove Missionary Baptist Church, I would write a story of the healings of Jesus.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt is in the White House. Miss Mattiedna Johnson is busy working in a science lab on the campus of the University of Minnesota. The project that she is working on with the U.S. Army will become well known around the world.
There was a handful of dirt scooped up in the Middle West that was found to have streptomyces in it. It was found to have a mole in it, terramyces mole in it, which from the mole they made the streptomyces, and they made the terramyces, and all the mycin family of drugs. That's what they made. That's what they had. Well, there's no way for them to get it any other way, and it had to come out of that lab, you see. And then I have some copies of a picture of Kyle Roderick that heard about it here in '86. Well, of course, in '82, I published my diary notes, and Congressman Stokes nominated me for the Spin Garden Medal. You know, Elijah's Spin Garden to set up this Spin Garden Medal for black people who had done something for humanity.
You know, I think we are living in the best times of our lives. Why? Because a lot of people who made contributions to this country are still living today. People like Miss Johnson, born in 1918, a sharecropper's daughter. She helped found the National Black Nurses Association, was also a missionary in Africa. She also headed revolutionary medical research. But I'm not the one to tell her story. Thank God we still got Miss Johnson. Let's watch.
That now we have the antibiotics, and we have terramycin syrup for babies and children and seniors and older people who have to be tube fed. When I walked in that lab at the University of Minnesota, Department of Plant Pathology, and Dr. Clyde showed me the mold that we were supposed to be dealing with, I said, Dr. Clyde, I said, man, I've been dealing with this mold since here I've been. It got on Mama's apple jelly. And I took some of the apple jelly at the bottom of the jar, and we ate it, but I made her some sweet water. When she was dying, supposed to have been dying with Galvin consumption, I said, you know, millions of people have been eating a whole lot of penicillin for many, many years and didn't even know that they were eating pure, unadulterated penicillin because it's the same mold. And he thought that was an interesting thing. He said, so you aren't afraid of it? I said, no, I'm not afraid of this because I've eaten jelly that had some of the substance off of this mold many and many a year because that's what poor people had to eat. And we didn't know it.
At the time, you didn't know it.
No, I didn't know it. I said, the only way I found out here that that's what the Army has got to find 2 molds to cure. I said, this should be a game almost. I said, because this mold, I'm familiar with that. And I know that certain things make it grow with a white fuzz on it, and certain things make it grow with a blue fuzz on it, and another certain thing gets in when it's on grapes or on muscadimes or on cabbage or whatever you're doing. I said, it takes the color of that. I said, it's the same mold. Well, he said, well, Dr. Fleming in England had found one of these molds in his petri dish where he had planted a germ. And they wrote, he wrote this paper, and the American Medical Association got a hold of it. Now, they had penicillin, but they did not know what would fight. So the Army's argument with the Congress was that they needed the money to send it to a lab where they would have the live germs to match it, because they wanted it for the staphylococcus, which was the gunshot wounds, and they wanted for the streptococcus, which was the upper respiratory, and influenza and all those diseases. So this was why they brought it to the University of Minnesota.
But you claim, and you don't look like a controversial person, but you claim because you are a black woman, you really haven't been given much, if any, credit for discovering this.
I have been ignored, but before we leave that part of the story, I want to tell you about this terrible mice mold that went upstairs and got in the tomato soup. And we say it was terrible mice because it's running over the house. That's where the name came from.
Really?
So this was what I was going to use for the second mold. I mean, as the second mold. So it was toward the last week that we were in the lab. So on that Friday, I took the scraping from the baby's mouth and put it in one of these, which we were using in the perfume atomizer, and put some water on it, and left it over till Monday. And when I looked at it, shook it Monday, it had the foam in it, fresh, looking like what I saw and took out of that baby's mouth back in St. Louis, you see. So that I was familiar with, you see. And I knew in that slime area, that was more natural for it. But I looked up the whole procedure of scarlet fever because the baby had died of scarlet fever. Okay, scarlet fever is called scarlet fever because in the medicine books, in all the references that I got, the germ would attack the red cells of the body and make the red cells waste the hemoglobin out in the serum of that child or that person. And this would get into circulation and they would turn red. And this was true, alive scarlet fever. So I had to use some fresh blood with this scraping from the baby's mouth in this perfume atomizer. And then I had to pull some out with my red cell count chamber, you know, because technicians had the red and white cell count and dilutions and that kind of stuff. So I had it there. So when he pulled the blood on Tuesday morning, with the syringe, and I had the tourniquet and everything, right on my arm, right here. It coagulated on us, and we could not use it. I cracked the syringe and still couldn't use a bit of it because it just looked like it turned to flesh. So I said, well, I won't give up. But he said, Mattie, maybe we can't do this. Maybe that's a good idea, but maybe we can't make it. I said, well, I have one more thing I'm going to do tonight. So I went home, and I got on the telephone, and I called Dr. Charles Drew in Washington, D.C., who was working with blood with the American Red Cross. You see, as a medical technician, I knew that. See, so I called him and got him about 9 o'clock that evening. And so I told him what I was doing, what I needed. So he said, if you could get some acetic acid or some white vinegar. I said, well, we have vinegar on the table because we use it when we cook greens and stuff and eat it. And he said, well, take your syringe. He said, pull it down to the 5 cc line. Then gradually slowly push it to the 1 cc line. Mean I was coating the barrel. See? And he said, then pull 4 cc's of blood in on the 1 cc, and 1 in 5 should hold it. He said, but if it doesn't, you call me back and I'll see what else we can do. And he said he was glad that I asked him because this was an important project of the United States Army, and he, you know, felt that I was really doing a job. So the next morning I got another syringe at the drugstore where I'd wait for the trolley, and I told the druggist what I was doing. He said, Mattie, you be careful, girl, because he said, there's no medicine for scarlet fever. I says, I know that. Everybody gets quarantined and this kind of stuff. So he didn't charge me for it. So I took it on, and that morning, Dr. John Ehrlich, who was the bacteriologist, the only medical person there besides me, and all he did was smoked his pipe on the book and looked over my shoulders. And so he pulled, I pulled the vinegar in the syringe, and then pushed it slowly to 1 cc, then put the needle on, and then he took it, and then went back in my arm right here. As a spot there, all you do is hit it, blood comes out. And so it didn't coagulate. So then I put it into the vial where the slime from the baby's mouth was, and then I pulled it out, put it under a microscope, and I had to turn it to 2500 magnification, which was the highest that microscope would go. And then I saw it popping. My red cells was popping open and looking like old paper bags under the microscope. Then he came and looked at it, and he put out a nice cuss word as the first so-and-so time he'd ever seen hemolysis. Now see, for bacteriologists, that was the process that did happen, you see, within the person's body. And so he said, it is alive, and it is ready to go out and kill somebody else. And he took his hand and squeezed me on my left shoulder. I only weighed about 130 pounds at that time. So that was not a demeaning or sex type of thing. It was something that, I want you to remember this, girl, you know. So that's what he did. And then he went on back and started writing. So then I sprayed 4 stacks of 8, which I had under this hood, and that I had planted on Monday, this terrible mice mold, because that's all I had. And so I sprayed them, and that was Wednesday morning. So Thursday morning, I read them. I pulled them out, and that mold that's drawn in that notes had run the bloody film around the rim. So it was my blood, see. And so I took some of the mold out of the 8 of them, mixed it in water, and poured it into some sterile dirt in 3 test tubes. You know, we had autoclaved the sterile dirt to ship the stuff. It was shipped, the R13 was shipped to the medicine companies, and they made the crystalline penicillin. All those drugs had psilin on the end. Crystalline penicillin G was the heavy one that they came out with. Okay, but this, I labeled it. 3 test tubes of sterile dirt wrapped in newspaper so they wouldn't crack each other. It was going in his pocket. And he knew what he had. So I labeled it. I said, this is a terrible mice mold tested against Streptococcus hemolyticus germ of scarlet fever. because he had just identified it, you see. In human blood. When the medicine's made up, please put it in a peppermint-flavored syrup in babies and children's doses to be given around the clock until the temperature drops. See, my mind was reflecting back to that baby that died in my arms. And so we wrapped it and cleaned that place out of there and got out of there time enough to catch the last trolley. They were dang, dang, danging down there for me. So I had to go down the steps and get in there. And I didn't hear any more about that until I began to see things that they were doing a streptomycin, which Dr. Waltman mixed with INH to treat TB. He got the Nobel Peace Prize in 1950. But without that terrible mice mold, there was no way they could have developed streptomycin. Then it took them till 1950 to do terramycin, which was the peppermint-flavored syrup at baby children's doses. And that eliminated quarantining completely, just wiped it out. And the public health system stopped quarantining anybody because there was a medicine for the babies. And they gave it round the clock, just exactly what I told them to do. They didn't miss a trick. And everybody talks about it, but they just can't think that a black woman did that. You know, no. If I had been white, the American Nurses Association looked up this Miss Haas, who died in Panama in 1921 with yellow fever. By her dying that way, they found out that it was mosquitoes that bit her that gave her the yellow fever. And the American Nurses Association put her picture on the postage stamp. I submitted my material to them, and it was sent back to me and said, we have no category for your work. The Red Cross that I volunteered for so many years on the east side of Cleveland here, because I was the only certified American Red Cross nurse, black, in Cleveland on this side of town. And I volunteered a lot for them. And they nominated me for the Mary Mahoney Award. Turned down. I found in the Sunday paper this talking about the penicillin project. They was going to bring it from Congress. Mm-hmm. The United States Army Medical Corps had gotten some money. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to develop penicillin molds to fight the gunshot wounds and the trench mouth that killed the soldiers and sailors in the First World War. Mm-hmm. And so this is why they had to come to the University of Minnesota Department of Plant Pathology, because penicillium was a grass. Ah. And so according to the biological phylum, they had to come to a large school of plant pathology so that they'd have enough PhDs there to do the work. So this was why all of this money and all of this equipment and everything was shipped in there. So I saw it in the Sunday paper, and of course I went over to get a job. Ah. And on the floor, there was a lot of equipment that had been shipped in. And some of these packages or specimens had burnt orange tags on it.
What were the tags for?
Burnt orange tags, to me, it was this color. Mm-hmm. And I knew that down under beneath there, it was the red blood red tags. You see, because that's the protocol of isolation.
I see.
So I told Dr. Clyde that, man, you're going to have to isolate this stuff. Mm-hmm. He said, isolate? Isolate? I said, yes, sir, you got to isolate that stuff. And so he said, well, what do you suggest? Mm-hmm. And so I told him that in the Minneapolis Tribune, there was this Phillips 66 oil company was selling the 19 cubic foot Cerevel refrigerators. Mm-hmm. You'd put the kerosene in the bottom, mm-hmm. light a wick, and a bottle of gas would send fumes up in the top of the refrigerator. Mm-hmm. And there you'd have ice crystals. But then in this section of the refrigerator, you would have 9 degrees. So he said, look over there in a box and tear it open and get a scratch pad and write down what you just told me. And I said, well, also bring me the biggest microscope you can find. And so he said, okay. I said, don't forget the kerosene. And so he ran on out. And as he was coming back, as he was going out the back door to where the trucks were, he saw this Dr. Hart, who was supposed to set up, you know, the employment of everybody. And so she came in and she asked me what was I doing. And so I told her who I was and everything. And then she said, well, after I told her, I was dealing with the contaminants, or the isolates. These were the names of what was the germs, which had the germs in it. And so this was the, she said, well, I will give you your applications and you can take it home with you and bring it back. Because when she got the name contaminant, she was not going to have anything to do with those contaminants.
You know, Miss Johnson, as I listened to what you talked about earlier, it sounds to me like you set up the protocol for this entire experiment.
Yes, well, it's my whole life story. And
Sounds so exciting.
well, it took a long time to accumulate enough material.
You know, with that in mind, I'm surprised with what you've told me. I wonder, why has it taken so long for everyone to realize that you discovered this?
It has just taken a long time, and most lawyers say, give me $5,000 up front, and I can't afford that. And it has taken many years for me to get my diary notes published and my book published. It does take a lot of work and money in order to come even this far. And of course, the illustrations, and I have some recognition from the congressman in the 101st Congress. And this young woman came and interviewed me here in Cleveland, and she put this in the U.S. magazine. And right here it says, John Singh, Communications Manager, Pfizer Pharmaceutical Division. We don't dispute Mattiedna's involvement in the penicillin project, but there is no question that Pfizer developed, tested, and named terramycin in their laboratories. You see, that kind of admission, made it possible for me to go further.
I understand. It's just such a contribution to the world.
Ms. Johnson, what do you think about it taking so long for you to finally be recognized?
Many people have said, well, Mattie, when you're dead, we'll honor you for it. I said, what you gonna say? Oh, we'll think of something. I said, well, I'm publishing my material and writing it down, so you'll know what to say.
That's right.
Right. Once I'm gone. Right.
Ms. Johnson, types go to Gambanga.
No, it's pronounced Banga. The G is silent.
I see.
That's a Jog-Quelly name.
Okay,
Right.
great. Can you tell me a little bit about what you did in West Africa?
Well, one of the most important things I think I did was May 11th, 1947, when I called the nurses and the hospital groups and so forth together, and we had a program at First Methodist Church in which Bishop King spoke. When he said the benediction, I got up and declared it a House of Delegates, and we elected the officers we had planned for the National Nurses Association of Liberia, with a proviso for a board of nursing. And then, of course, my high school back in Arkansas sent a huge box of vegetable seeds, and that went to Booker Washington Institute.
Okay.
And the day after Christmas, my mom sent my Christmas box, and in it she put the largest sweet potato that she raised that year. It was this large, and but she put mothballs in it, and I couldn't eat it.
You couldn't eat it.
So I had to hack it up and plant it. And within 3 weeks' time, I had sweet potato vines everywhere. And of course, we were having the dedication of the mission residence, so I had to send some of these sweet potato vines to Big Chief Pongpai of the Jog-Quelly tribe and ask him about some eggs. So he sent me 3 duck eggs to make a sheet cake with.
Oh, my.
And so this was how I was fixing his lunch. But now there are sweet potatoes all over Liberia, and they call them the Kelly Sweets. And they grow in such abundance that there's a daily market of them in Banga.
You have a sweet potato named after you?
Right. They call them Kelly Sweets.
Mattiedna Johnson is an inspiration to not only black people, but all people who are interested in medicine and cures that have been found over time. Unfortunately, we don't know very much about Mrs. Johnson, but in 1991, Congressman Lou Stokes did enter into the congressional record the story of Mattiedna Johnson. She had lived in Cleveland. She came from a background that was deprived. She had been abused not only by her family, but also in her marriage. But she didn't let that stop her. She went on, she became a pioneer, She was very instrumental in the early work of using penicillin to cure not only infections but also scarlet fever, which killed many children until we understood the wonders and the power of penicillin against streptococcal infections like those that are caused by scarlet fever. Mrs. Johnson also, later in her career, went to Liberia and worked delivering babies in a mud hut. A very, very interesting woman. I think we could consider her the Rosa Parks of medicine because she was one of the founding members of the National Association of Black Nurses. And that group has been instrumental in making sure that public health issues for black people stay in the public eye. As an example, Mrs. Johnson was one of the first people to understand the importance of doing blood pressure screens and actually started doing them here in a clinic that was based out of Corey United Methodist Church. And it has been proven to be a very powerful indicator of high blood pressure and underlying illnesses that affect black people. Not only black people, but all people. And the importance of that and Mrs. Johnson's contribution to that should not be underestimated.
In the First World War, the fellows were shot on the field. They couldn't crawl away. They couldn't get up. Nobody came to get them for 3 or 4 days. So they lay there in the mud, water, and rain, and the mouth got sore, and they coughed. They got pneumonia. They got all of the upper respiratory infections. And this was why the Army wanted to get some medicine for these soldiers and sailors that were dying on the field in the First World War. So after I was able to crystallize the one for the gunshot wounds, because I had seen the substance from the mold in the jelly, and had taken cream. You know, back in those days, if you didn't have enough cream to put in a churn, you would put it in a half-gallon jar and you'd shake it. And so from this, I got the plant pathologist to let me put the mold in a shake bottle. And I knew that the mold would give up its essence if I shook it long enough. So we shook it, and then in this illustration here, in my penicillin diary notes, is how I showed that it was done in the shake bottle, and then I was able to take it and match it with other substances and crystallize it. And of course, we sent that on to the medicine companies to make a crystalline penicillin G, which is now the antibiotic of this century. The other mold was, of course, the terrible mice mold. Here's how we grew it in the shake bottle. So when I was able to do this, and this went on to New York, to the Pfizer laboratories, they took the mold. And from this mold, they decided to make terramycin. Then took them about 5 years to do streptomycin in the peppermint-flavored syrup in babies and children's doses. And then the Mothers of America declared it the miracle drug of the century.
My mother's experience as a girl was sort of rough because her father was very mean to them, and I think this was sort of a hangover that she just didn't want any girls because she felt that girls had a hard time living and getting through. And of course the emphasis was on training of boys and seeing that they became somebody. But girls were more or less mistreated and left out in the cold to sort of tough it for themselves. But because I was alerted through the reading of the family health book, I was picking up on a lot of things, and I could talk to Papa all the time about it. And I think that my mother had a feeling that I was not very important among the group because she had Robert, Mary, Charles, and Joe. And then she had gotten the asthma from getting a cold after Joe was born. And she was sickly there for quite a while. And of course, the things that I did were sort of strange and kind of out in left field, and many people didn't know what I was doing half the time. So I just sort of got into an awkward spot. But every 2 years, Mama had another boy and another boy and another boy. And so when she got sick, I was right there to see about her. And of course, I had given her some of that jelly in the boiled water to get her to drink the water. And of course, she didn't want to, but I got Papa to tell her to do it. And because she was dying, she was really skin and bones. And so I didn't know at the time that, you know, that it was going to help her. But many women were dying, and I just didn't want her to die. I loved my mother, even though she felt that I was just sort of, everybody said I was lazy because I would be reading a book or doing something of that sort. And when I, after I gave the Mama the sweet water to drink and got her to eating and feeling better, then we combed her hair, and the doctor came back to see her. And he said, Minnie, looks like a trained nurse has been on duty with you, because some of the other women across the community have died, and you're still living and doing well. And he said, look like a trained nurse been on duty with you. And Mama says, oh, Tots did that. Says, she doesn't matter. And so then after that, the program was coming up for Children's Day, and I decided to write the paper. And after all, I was sitting there reading the Bible. I read the Bible all the way through to Mama, and that helped me to learn how to read out aloud. And I was able to pronounce words and things as I read through the Bible to her. And I'd sit and go to sleep by the lamp light, or the light from the fireplace at night. And sometimes Papa would take me and put me to bed. But I'd go to sleep on the Bible or the books that I was reading. But I just wanted to learn and wanted to help my mother and do whatever I could. And because I wasn't the usual type of person, I guess sort of made me sort of awkward and didn't encourage my mother to do very much for me. But Papa always talked with me. Papa took me with him to mark the pigs for the neighbors. And I could hold the pigs between my knees and the little feet, and very still. And so that Papa could heat the blade of the knife and could pierce the little gland and take the gland out. And he could do it faster with me than with Joe or Charles. And so this way, I was his favorite to go with him and carry the lantern. And he would bring the pig back, because they would give us a pig for his bark and the other pigs for the people. And this was how we accumulated most of the time larger herd of pigs in a sow and one of the bow hogs, they called it, for the pigs for the next year. This was how it was on the farm. This is a part of how we survived. My father had made this bargain with God, and he never forgot it, and he never let me forget it. So that this was what was forever before me. And you know, sometimes when fathers, most fathers are proud of their little girls, and I guess this is by nature that a father is proud of his daughter. And of course, Mary didn't take a whole lot of concern about doing reading and the things that I did. So Papa, knowing that I was energetic and could read and interpret things and understand things, he felt very proud of me, and he encouraged me all the time to go on. And he told me that I could go on and become a medical missionary and go to Africa and serve. And I believed that, and I worked toward that. And of course, when I would make 10 or 15 cents, I would save my half of the money, because we had to give Mama half of the money that we earned. And so Mama would look under my pillow in the bed, and they would take my money and pay the doctor bill when he would come and give her a shot for the asthma. And that was the only money in the house. And so when I got older, I learned better, and I decided to leave my half of the money at the post office with Miss Jimmy, who was at the general delivery desk. And this way, she put the money in a shoebox, and in nickels, dimes, and quarters, over a number of years, I saved $286 in nickels, dimes, and quarters to go to school on, because there were no scholarships in those days, and we were poor. And that was in the terrible drought area. It was a drought area. Then there was the Depression area, and the cotton wasn't selling, and people were leaving their wagons at the compress and going on the freight trains at night and leaving Arkansas and going to Chicago and Detroit and Cleveland and other places.
Lorraine Hansberry asked the question, what happens to a dream deferred? Well, we ask what happens when a woman's life history has been sustained. We do know what keeps Miss Johnson going. It's her faith in God, Almighty God.
I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust. This is the song that I sang as I caught the boat from Monrovia, Liberia, West Africa in May of 1948. Well, they sang this song and they said to me, "Sister, will you trust in the Lord? Sister, will you trust in the Lord? Sister, will you trust in the Lord until you die? Sister, will you trust in the Lord? Sister, will you trust in the Lord until you die?" Just one more verse. Brother, will you trust in the Lord? Brother, will you trust in the Lord? Brother, will you trust in the Lord until you die? Brother, will you trust in the Lord? Oh, brother, will you? Well, what did you think of everything, Bobby? Bobby, you think the crowd was pretty good today?
Yeah, they were pretty good.
He was acting all right.
Yeah, they asked a lot of questions.
Thanks, Bobby. What do you really think about this book? About the whole story, the movie and everything? What do you think about it?
Out of everything in your life, the one thing that you, little Tots, and Mattiedna had always wanted was love and acceptance. And the only person you ever got that from was your dad. And because he was a man, he couldn't give it to you like a woman could. And your mother hated you, so she couldn't give it to you. And so all through your life, it's always been love and acceptance. And I guess if I really answer the question, how do I feel about it? I guess I'd have to answer that. Do I love you? Yes. Why? I don't know. Okay? I don't have to explain that part.
Yes.
I don't have to explain that part. Do I accept you? In all your frailties, good and bad, yes. You're my mama.
Yeah.
And I don't have to explain that either. So I love you and I accept you, but I know that ain't enough, okay? So I'm not even gonna worry about it. And I know that no matter what anybody does, and I told JJ and Ray when they started the whole process of the documentary, it's not gonna be enough. So when you all get to the point where you have enough film and enough dialogue and enough everything to pull it together, you're going to have to decide in your own minds that it's enough. Because guess what? This lady ain't never going to say it's enough.
You know, Miss Johnson, I've recently completed your book, Tots Goes to Bonga, and it's really a fascinating story. I got a lot of visuals as I was reading it, and it just took me on a lot of emotional roller coaster, and I was just so proud of you, all the things that you accomplished. But one of the things that I noticed in the book is that you were very close to your dad, and I wish you could, you know, speak about that a little bit more.
Well, we lived in a mud hut down in the hills of Mississippi, and as a small girl, Papa telling me about the how I was born. He told me 11 dozen times about how small I was in his hands, and how this teardrop dropped on my lips, and he said, sometimes I said, well, Papa, where did the tear come from? He says, I don't know, it just dropped on your lips and you started tasting it. And he said, I felt God had answered my prayer that quick, because if you could eat, I could feed you, and you'd be able to grow. And he said, I said, well, Papa, what did you want me to do? He said, I wanted you to become a medical missionary and go to Africa and serve. I said, me, Papa? Becoming a medical missionary? And all we can do is chop cotton and plant corn? What kind of how will I be able to do it? He said, well, Tots, I want you to really have faith in God and believe in Him. And you know, I've taught you to pray at home when you pull my boots off and wash my feet. He said, I know that the way you wash my feet and go through my toes and get the mud out of there, that you ought to make a pretty good nurse someday. And of course, I guess Papa was feeling that I was already in the process of nursing, washing people's feet. I said, well, Jesus washed his disciples' feet and in the Last Supper. He said, yeah, that's right, you do remember the Bible, reading the Bible to your mama. I said, well, Papa, I read it all the way through. So this is one of the things that Jesus did. Well, he said, then you can go ahead and follow into that particular situation. So he says, you got to grow up. And I said, well, then I'll have to do a lot of work to become a nurse and go on and become a medical person and go to the mission field. And I said, well, where will I get all that money from? He said, you just trust in God. He'll guide you and he'll help you. And of course, that's what I've had to do even as a little kid. And sometimes on my way to school, when I had to trot to catch up to the other kids, I was praying. So that was a part of the whole deal.
You know, we're living in one of the greatest times of our lives.
Why do you say that?
Well, I say that because we're living in a high-tech society, and we're living with people who have made a great contribution to this society, and they're still living today.
You must be talking about Miss Johnson.
Yes, I am.
You know, I can't believe that she's 77 years young and she's still getting around real well.
And not only that, she's been in the field of nursing for over 50 years. And she helped develop one of the greatest drugs in this century and did not get any credit for it.
Well, what about the work she did to help find a cure for scarlet fever? And not to mention, she used her own blood.
I graduated from Robert R. Moton High School. And the night that I spoke, I had been given a gift from the beauty shop, the beautician, and so my hair was very long and was horsetail brown, and so she washed my hair early. This beautician did, and I sat behind the door and dried it because you know they didn't have the dryers that we have today. And so I sat there all day. She took care of all the customers that came in, and then around 3 o'clock she finally got to my hair. And one lady said I looked like an old dirty mop sitting behind the door. And so she pressed my hair and gave me some colonial curls down on my shoulders. And then by around 5 o'clock, I made it home. And Mama asked me where I'd been, and I told her that I'd been at the beauty shop all day long, that the woman washed my hair the first thing in the morning, and I sat behind the door learning my oration, and I knew it by heart. I could say it. Did she want me to say it? So she said no. So she reached up on the wall and got Papa's razor strap that he sharpened his razor with, and she beat me all over. And I wouldn't cry. I just sat there and looked at her, and so of course I was burning all over. But she got angry, then she fell across the bed and started crying. And so I told her, I said, Mama, here's the 2 tickets for you and Papa to come. You don't have to come if you don't want to, but you all have seats up toward the front because I'll be giving my oration. And I have to run on across the field to the school so I could get in line for 6:30. And so that's how I got past Mama and all that terrible beating. But I spoke that night, prepared for better things, and the audience stood and they applauded and applauded. And I didn't know why they continued to applaud, because some of them were crying, and as I stood there talking. And so this is how I graduated. And of course, I did not want to go to Talladega, where they was given a scholarship for English teachers. I wanted to be a nurse, so I chopped cotton all that summer for Mr. Hollenbeck, and so he gave me the $50 to enter Jane Terrell Hospital because they were the first school that answered me in Memphis. I wish to thank Bobby Lou Kelly, my daughter, for bringing my life story down from 1,000 pages to 230 and putting it in a readable form so that it could be published. I wish to thank Mr. Jackson and Mr. Cooper for their help and understanding of me and the story. The year of 1944, I had finished medical technology, and of course always already a registered nurse. I saw in the Minneapolis Tribune, the newspaper, the story of the penicillin project that was set by the United States Army Medical Corps. They had penicillin, but they needed 2 molds, one for the gunshot wounds and one for the upper respiratory. So these 2 molds had to be tested against live germs. And that, of course, I did under the microscope. We tested R13 some 3,200 times and sent it on to the medicine companies for the staphylococcus infection for the gunshot wounds and the prevention of gas gangrene. The other mold I nicknamed Terrible Mice and tested it against the scarlet fever specimen, but I had to bring it alive by using some of my blood. This way, I feel that testing it, and it worked out. Of course, I had to call Dr. Charles Drew and ask him what he used to keep blood from coagulating. So this way, I was able to test it. This way, it went on in the pocket of Dr. John Ehrlich to Pfizer in New York, and it changed from Terrible Mice to terramycin. These 2 medications for these 2 germs are now known as the antibiotics of the American Medical Association. So that here we have the antibiotics. The other story I would like to tell you about is in 1973, I was in Cleveland at the Corey United Methodist Church. We had counted the membership to be about 835 people, and we decided with a group of nurses to do the blood pressures of the congregation. And of course, we did the research, and I have published that within my book, Tots Goes to Bonga. And I do hope that as you see the story and read it, you will appreciate these 2 things, that now they say that blood pressure screening is the most preventive measure in modern medicine. So if I can get this story out so that people will know the history of those two medical breakthroughs, I would certainly appreciate you knowing it and hope that you will enjoy the book and the story as you look at it. And thank you so much. I do hope that this will be clear to you, and of course, if you need a copy of the book, you can always write or call me. This is Mattiedna Johnson. I'm a registered nurse, I'm a clinical laboratory technician, and now I have a master's degree in theology. Thank you.